Hello, welcome to Test, Optimize, and Scale. Excited to have Jeremy Barnett with us here today, co-founder and CEO of Rad AI. This is episode 2 with Jeremy. Have the privilege of getting to dive into all the developments over at Rad. We've used Rad as an influencer network years back, their AI platform and how they've transitioned to be able to serve some of the top enterprise businesses there are is beyond fascinating. And I'm told we're going to be able to go into the details today. So Jeremy, thanks for being on. Glad you were able to join here today.
I appreciate you having me, Jason. Thank you.
And I know so much about you. You know, we've had the chance to work together in various capacities. I've spent many of hours on the golf course together as well, too. So I want to familiarize the audience a bit with you. Tell them, some of your history, some of the things you were doing before this, some of your exits, all of your successes. Figured we could start with your story.
Well, no, I appreciate that. It sounds very colorful when you introduce me. So I think the first thing I would say is it's not a whole bunch of roses and smelly flowers and gardens that are really, really pretty to look at. It's been a journey with several ups and downs across the way. I think we met each other in late 2012, 2013. I was the co-founder and CEO of a fashion tech company. I exited that company in, I think it was late 2017. And from there founded Rad. At the time it was Rad Intelligence, which is now Rad AI post this recent acquisition, which we'll get into. The idea behind Rad was creating an environment that was activating influencers, but taking out some of the clunkiness associated with what traditionally is a part of running an influencer campaign, making it easy not just for the brands, but also for the influencers to activate with brands. And we got traction with that model. It wasn't horrible. It was a good single. But it really wasn't what what we would quantify as a game-changing venture return opportunity. So we thought that we could do bigger and better through searching through different vendor partners, channel partners, testing and doing what any CEO does when you're trying to figure out product market fit and who you are and what you are. We came across a partner in Toronto, a company by the name of Atomic Reach, and we started underpinning some of the campaigns that we were running about a year ago before the merger. With their AI, and very quickly it turned into a vendor relationship, into hey, we should partner, into can we convince both boards that a merger / acquisition makes sense. And there were certainly some complexities associated with that, given where they were in their model and where we were in our model, but we figured out to make it work. And we closed on the transaction August 1st of 2021, so literally a couple of months ago, and since the close, it's been off to the races.
Which is huge. So it sounds like the merger, and I actually want to go a few steps back afterwards, but the merger has increased both companies in terms of value, capabilities, overall trajectory together, and they were a development company. You guys had all of these great things going on the influencer side of things. So it's been this transformation, and you guys now are able to deliver a far more impactful product as a result.
Yeah, so we're collectively one company now, which is radintel.ai. That's our website, and we are a content AI growth platform for enterprise teams. And we've managed to figure out ways to create value out of what Rad was doing before with respect to influencer activations and the way we think about influencer campaigns and the way we think about content creation with influencers, which is very unique and different than from anything that we've seen. But it's always leading with the content AI first, with what the Atomic Reach team not just had built, but what they had gone to market with. So this is one of those instances where we were able to capitalize on some IP that they've built. And when I say that, it's not something that you can just go do. They had invested significant capital into their IP. And there were some problems with respect to bringing the product to market that they had. More of a technical organization, more product focused, more engineering focused. So that really boded well for what Rad was really good at, which was strategic partnerships, business development, sales, bringing products to market. So now we have a conflated offering between what they were doing and what we are doing now. And we have a hybrid environment of SaaS contracts that are typically enterprise level contracts, 1 year, 2 year plus, with brands that classify as an enterprise level brand, healthcare, finance, companies that have large content teams, hospitality brands, things like that. And then we have brands that come to us where they'll RFP, typically a larger campaign somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 up, and we will underpin the campaign with the AI. We have a services layer built on top of it, and the idea is converting all contracts eventually to an ARR contract type. So we're still in the late seed stage with respect to our combined product offering, but we are getting traction now, and the idea of creating a marketing environment that's flexible, that works with content teams the way content teams want to create content, is really what our mission is.
Amazing. And it sounds like you guys have had a huge uplift in terms of campaign performance as a result of the AI. AI is a term that's thrown around a lot. What is the artificial intelligence that's being used here? How can it go beyond human capabilities? Just to tap into the product a little further, what is the AI and how does it make marketing perform better?
That's a good question. So this is, you and I know better than anybody that digital marketing is filled with jargon and nonsense.
Sure.
We definitely want to stay away from that as much as possible. But at the end of the day, your question about what does the AI do is probably the smartest, best question we can ask. So the first thing that we do is we analyze the performance history of the client's data. So typically that's Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics. We plug it into our platform, and we're looking and consuming more data than any human eye can not just look at, but analyze and then come up with a recipe. So we're looking at all of the measures that are tied to the performance metric that has been indicated by our client that they want to achieve with that specific type of content. So when you think about language and words with respect to digital marketing, language is used in digital ads, Google ads, Facebook ads. Language is used in email sequences. It's used in the subject line. It's used in the body. Language is used in blogs, articles, landing pages, conversion pages. So all of these pages that you have in your digital ecosystem are using language. So we have natural language generation AI that is identifying the language that should be used on these different pieces of content that you have in your marketing ecosystem. And it's going to give you the supporting data to not just tell you what should be used and why, but it's giving you the performance data as a backdrop. So as a marketer, you can look at it from a perspective like it's giving me a diagnosis of all of my content and what should be done. And then we're giving a recipe of what you need to do. And then you can then in turn plug that into our editing environment, and the AI will literally rewrite the content for you. So it's telling you what you should do and why, and then it's creating an actionable plan, an environment where you can actually use the AI to rewrite your content for you.
And how many variants? So just to break down how revolutionary this is, the marketing data analysis is what separates a successful campaign from one that is written off, one that is just looked at as a failure across the board. And what you're saying is the messaging can make all of the difference. You guys are doing a diagnosis, you're having a recipe put together, and not only does it give the guidelines on what to write in an advertisement, in an organic piece of content, and something the influencer is putting out so that the result is greater, more impactful, stronger performance, but that the AI will actually write that creative. It'll write the messaging. Can it have variants? Can those variants be customized for different audiences? Does it have those abilities to create more than one set of messaging?
Well, it rewrites it. So it doesn't write it, it rewrites it. I think that's a really key component.
Sure.
So the very first thing when we onboard a client is we have to tell the AI what the client is wants to accomplish. Yes. So when we ingest, let's just say we're ingesting your Google Analytics environment, we're essentially aligning the source of truth or the goalpost for what the AI is going to tell you to do and what the definition of success is with the client. So that's the very first part of it, is making sure those things are not just consistently understood by both parties, but agreed to by our client. In other words, if we're looking at the conversion environment for your product descriptions, or if we're looking at your Google Ads, we're going to agree on what the analysis is looking at. We're going to agree on the customer profile, and then that subsequently will drive the diagnosis. So the way we think about your environment is a little bit different than like, hey, you're going to write content with our platform. It's more like, hey, you're going to tell us the type of content that you want to create the best possible outcome for. And then you're going to define the definition of what the best possible outcome means. So it's flexible. And the reason why it's done that way is because there's different types of content: blogs, articles, thought leadership, emails, product descriptions, Google Ads, Facebook ads. So you have a content type. And then each one of those pieces of content, or content types, for example, has different objectives associated with them. For example, in emails, the objective is often to improve your open rate. Whereas, for example, in a conversion page on your website for product descriptions, your objective is to improve the conversion rate percentage. Whereas, for example, with Google Ads, your objective is to improve your click-through rate, right? So all of these things have different objectives. So the most important part of a appropriate AI analysis environment is to ensure that the AI is told what it needs to do and why at the very beginning of the process. Otherwise, you're going to have very inconsistent diagnosis and recipes. And once that's done, you can now create as many different customer profiles and segments as you want in our platform. So, for example, maybe you're a brand and you have 6 or 7 different personas, and you want the best diagnosis and recipe for each one of those personas as it relates to your marketing objective and as it relates to the content type or the marketing content type that you're putting into the ecosystem. So then you can start getting very granular with your messaging as it relates to your customer profile, taking into consideration these other variables.
So you're able to have that customized personalized experience for that customer profile, and based on all the data, it's physically put together.
It's a diagnosis that's endemic to the customer profile, type of marketing content, and digital performance objective. It's always endemic to those 3 variables, and that will give you the recipe associated with those different variables for how you want to accomplish your marketing goals.
And, I love the talk about source of truth, how success is measured. It's actually how I've seen a lot of influencer campaigns fail in the past, let alone in comparison towards other content types. It is not designing the algorithm to measure off the correct event, not setting up, as you're saying, the AI to be reading appropriately, and more importantly, optimizing towards what's going to be meaningful, what's going to produce a stronger level of takeaway for everybody.
Yeah, I think we should color a little bit with respect to the way we think about influencers in general. So we don't really we think about influencers as a really great place to create content depth, but we think about influencers from more of a deconstructive perspective, where when we engage with influencers, they're mandated to create several different pieces of content that fit different form variations: short form video, long form video. It could be across any of the social channels. But the idea is we're taking the content that the influencers create. There is some organic value to what the influencers create, but from our perspective, the value in the content that the influencers create is going to be realized by using the content in your paid media amplification, by using the content in your email sequencing, by using the content sometimes in your product description if you're an e-commerce brand. Maybe you're using the content in your blogs, in your articles. So from our value, when we activate an influencer campaign, we're thinking about all of the different places that the influencer's content can be used. And then the value proposition that the AI environment creates is you have this AI optimized environment that has the best version of your copy and language peppered in with some very, very highly curated influencer content that we've selected through the AI. And the combination of those 2 things will create a dramatic improvement over your existing environment when you're comparing apples to apples.
Sure. You're taking all of the top performing marketing channels, placements, but being able to use influencers in it, which for us, it means social proof. It means third party validation. Instead of the brand talking about the brand, it's this trusted source talking about how great the brand, the product is. And just to emphasize that further, you're not only letting that live in an organic place. You said, yeah, organic, it's part of it, but if we're able to use it in a paid environment, if we're able to, and the significance behind that is scale and targeting and the advertising AI, all these amazing tools that allow for a stronger result. But also, here's what it looks like on the blog. Here's what it looks like in the email. Here is a whole spectrum of different touch points to re-engage that audience towards the point of conversion.
That's right. You have, just think about an influencer landing page, or we'll call it a brand landing page that has the influencer's persona embedded into it in a curated environment with AI optimized language in that environment that speaks to that customer profile in a very, very unique voice. That's a great way to use it. Now think about connecting that same influencer to an email sequencing environment that's already been identified as a specific customer profile. So now you have a specific customer profile that's getting communicated to in the language that they prefer with this influencer that we already have identified as influential to that customer profile. So what it does is it just creates this environment of communicating to people in a way that's consistent with how they want to be communicated to. That's one important part of it. The other part of it is making sure as a company that we are able to benchmark these environments and get brands to sign off on the benchmark performance analysis. And the reason why we do that is we like to make sure that there's a real connected value to the AI optimized landing pages or the AI optimized ads to the already existing environments that these brands typically have. So you're really able to see like a difference in performance, and you're also able to really clearly draw a line to value. And because of the nature of the amount of data that we like to look at to create these recipes, and also the incremental value associated with the AI learnings and subsequent insights and the deployment of those learnings and insights, it really just kind of it dictates the type of clients that get value out of our product and offering, which is at enterprise level, healthcare, finance, content teams that are typically graded. We speak directly to CMOs. That typically CMOs are the highest turnover C-level position that's out there. So we give them the tools to not just draw a real connected tissue to the performance analysis that we're providing, but to be able to show the performance and the improvement so they can go back and talk to their colleagues. Maybe it's the CEO or CFO or whoever they work directly with.
Sure. It's really profound that you're doing this, and for the influencer space, it's the next evolution of it. I mean, we've been big fans of what you guys have been doing with paid amplification for influencers for some time now, and I've heard you reference it before in the past as syndication, and beyond just one influencer post for that one day, now it can continue to live in your campaign once the AI sees what's working, what's not, how to improve it, so on and so forth. Also, for me, when I hear AI, where I really learned about it from a business context is programmatic advertising, which I was taught it goes beyond what a media buyer can do. It looks at the day and time of week, the audience. Instead of measuring an audience by about 50 filters, I could probably tell you about 50 offhand. It could look at millions of filters and really find the right audience at the right time with the right content. So to hear that you're doing that, but not just from an ad exchange point of view, not just from that application, but across the organic content, across various ad channels, across social ad channels. Again, it really speaks to why this is so effective, why enterprise levels are working with you guys, enterprise company levels are seeing stronger campaigns with you guys than if they were working with influencers directly. It's that tech that just creates a completely different vehicle, across the board.
It is highly differentiated. We definitely don't have, there's nobody else in the influencer space, and this is not an anecdotal sound bit. There's really nobody that's even doing anything close to what we're doing. I can also say, I think it's fair to say that we looked at our strength with running influencer campaigns as a value proposition that we could layer on to the technology. We also are, we were just kind of figuring out where and how we want to point the technology. So there's other applications for the content AI. It naturally fits with content marketing teams, but there's other applications that are also very interesting that potentially dramatically improve platform performance across very large platform offerings. For example, you can go into different environments that are, maybe it's a specific group, maybe it's a specific feed, maybe it's a specific communication environment, and you can really identify the recipe that's going to unlock the best engagement or the best experience in that environment. We use nonlinear regression analysis. It's automated nonlinear regression analysis, and all that is really jargon for, we just look at more data than any human eye can see, and then we organize it and correlate it to the measures in that environment that drive the desired engagement that as a brand you're looking to accomplish. So that's really the way we think about it from the front end part of it, as far as that's the diagnosis and recipe part of it. The part of it that is really special, that I kind of say this is where the magic happens, is when you rewrite the content with the AI, taking these suggestions and recipes and the diagnosis of what should be done and shouldn't be done into consideration. So that's really the hardest part of what we were able to accomplish. That's what our IP is centered around, and it's what we're taking to market. So I guess I'm saying all this because we are really still figuring out a lot of these things that we're doing with clients. So the influencer part of it is something that it's great. It's awesome. We're running campaigns and we're happy to do it. It gets us in the door at enterprises that we typically wouldn't have an opportunity to get in the door at. It's also, a part of we look at influencers. It's a part of a marketing ecosystem. So, we don't think about influencers in traditional, like, hey, we're going to activate an influencer and they're going to get one post and you're going to get a certain amount of likes and comments. We're not really thinking about that in that context. We're thinking about it more as like an overarching content marketing structure and strategy, where we have 20 influencers that are participating. We have a certain amount of reach that that is going to be guaranteed as part of the campaign, and we're going to create an AI optimized environment across your marketing ecosystem that's completely measured from start to finish. So it's a comprehensive, very thorough program, and it's typically for brands that are looking for something a little bit deeper than your traditional influencer agency might be willing to offer. That they want to understand the impact of all of the content, how it affects their conversion rates, how it affects their email performance. They want to understand how it affects maybe their blog performance. It's a little bit different, and we found that there's a market for that. That's the other thing. A lot of times people say, well, it's too complicated, or I don't get it. That's not our customer. Our customer is an educated buyer. They've gone through several different variations of different media and marketing campaigns, and they appreciate the depth and intimacy that we go as a company. And they also are looking forward to getting these insights, because the insights do unlock value in other areas of their content marketing. So that's really who our customer is, and that's the person that we're speaking to.
Sure. And there's been so much gray area in the past with working with influencer networks, from the business development side to the reporting to the wrap up, operating in a gray space in terms of what was really produced. So it's a massive need in the market. It's a massive need at the enterprise level. And I see more groups at various stages adopting into this and looking to find ways to use your tech over time here. I want to break down a misconception a little bit and talk influencers for a moment. You hear the word influencer, you think, hey, this is an Instagram model. People are engaging based on physical features, popularity of a travel location or a fashion brand or a chef or something like that. And sure, that definitely moves the needle for some brands. But you've really opened up my mind and how we run our campaigns when you've talked to me about LinkedIn influencers and what's pushing things from a B2B perspective, various types of moms who are on social platforms and can really shape purchase behavior. I know I'm just touching into a couple profiles here, but can you talk about what an influencer is, pertaining to some of your conversations and how it could go beyond, a generalization of the term?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So influencers, from our perspective, are not necessarily the biggest, don't necessarily need to have the biggest following. They just need to have the right audience that's following them, that cares. So we do a lot of B2B influencers where we'll create environments around somebody that's got 15 to 25,000 followers on LinkedIn, for example. It's somebody that's an authority in their space, just to kind of keep it really, really simple. Maybe they're authority in a content AI space. Maybe they're an authority in cybersecurity, whatever. But these are influential people. Typically, the people that are following them are executive vice presidents. Maybe they're CMOs, a combination of the two. But influencers in our mind are people that genuinely will influence an experience or a result. And they also are really good at creating content. So we're looking for people that are good at creating content that's aligned with what our objective is. We're looking for influencers that are truly influential. And most of the influencers that we're working with understand that the organic reach on the social platforms is suppressed, therefore it's very limited. So in order to really create the value out of the content, you have to have some strategy and some science behind the content being created in order for it to really work. And we found that there's not a lot of people that are doing it. We found that there's lots of opportunities to do it successfully. And we also found that, people that are personalities that are influential to specific B2B industries, they're more professional, they're happy to work with you. And look, there's not a one size fits all. I can tell you from our perspective, the most important thing when engaging with influencers is engaging with an influencer who creates really good quality content based off of the objective that the brand is trying to accomplish with the media campaign. That's part of it. They have to be okay with the content being distributed, so you need to have your rights negotiated with the influencer content. And you also need to have a really clear understanding of what type of content needs to be created to achieve the company's goals. Because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily what the influencer does on the first leg of it. It's what happens once you take all that content and you put it into these different places, emails, blogs, paid media, whatever. And that's where you're going to create the value out of the content. So that's really the way we think about it. We get very traditional influencer campaigns that are hospitality or travel specific. And, a lot of those influencer campaigns kind of look and smell very similar to traditional influencer campaigns on the front side. But the difference is really on the back side, where we have environments that have been created through our brand and technology to really take advantage of the distribution opportunities with the content the influencers have created. And then we have things that are a little bit, we'll call them different, niche, which are very much B2B focused. And, there's great environments for that. LinkedIn is a great environment for that. Twitter can be a great environment for that. Reddit can be a great environment for that. These are not the typical environments that you think of, but oftentimes it's these different environments where the people that you're engaging with are highly influential to the audience that cares about what these people have to say. So, it's up to us to unlock these insights and strategies to our client and be able to deliver these in a way that's compelling, that shows them that it actually works compared to whatever else that they're doing. So that's really the way we think about things here at Rad.
Sure. And it's clear why it's working. That process, validated by the data, it's all data driven. I think of a table with the brands, the platform, and most importantly, the consumers on the other side, the clients, the prospective target audiences there. So the fact that you're finding the perfect individuals to reach with this content based on the AI is really a standout. And I appreciate you breaking down, what an influencer is, because again, it's misused in so many ways, and it's really just that third-party validation as you're serving, as you're saying that you're serving, and that's why you're getting the response, because it's coming from that trusted source. Yeah.
Saying it's misused is like, I think that people could be educated, and I don't know if misuse is right. Like I think it is misused, and I think you think it's misused because we look at it a certain way. But I think some brands are also very comfortable with sort of like the status quo, and it depends oftentimes. Like, well, who's in charge of the budget, and then you start getting into other real interesting nuances. Okay, well, they have a long-standing relationship with X, and they care about some of these vanity metrics because that's what they care about, which is fine. We are finding that environment is shifting though, and we are finding that you need to be able to go a little bit deeper with the impact associated with the content the influencers are creating. So I agree with you. I think misuse is basically in the eye of the beholder, right? It's sort of like it's almost like a debate that you could have with people, like, well, what's the right way to do it? And I think you could get three people on the line that sound just as slick as you and I sound when we're talking to each other, and they could give you very compelling reasons otherwise. But this is the way we think about things here at Rad, for sure.
Absolutely. And again, it's outstanding to me because I've been on the line with influencer networks who just try to sell me on the allure of an influencer posting about their brand. And I know that the companies I work with, both early stage and at much different levels, I've worked with enterprise companies, and it's like you said, they're sophisticated buyers. There's not wasteful dollars at that level in my experience. They still want to make sure that any activation is speaking towards their objective. It's moving the needle. It's having a meaningful impact on the metrics that they want to measure. So to be able to have everything in the background here is, I believe, what sets you apart. And like you said, you guys have strived to have this created. You could have just continued doing influencer campaigns, tapping into different AI. No, you're building this foundation, and for the next stages, I won't ask too many questions about what's coming next. I know a lot of that is private in this space of tech as a whole, but I am curious on some recommendations. If anyone's listening in, you guys have obviously gone through an extensive process to be able to evolve the product to the point where you're at today. Furthermore, your marketing, your overall business development, and the relationships that you guys have been able to put together, which says enough for itself. What would you recommend for a founder who's listening in today? What would you recommend for a marketer who's listening in today? Or anyone in the VC community who watches these different ecosystems performing in terms of what they should test out, how they can make changes to their business to push things further, or even use your technology, use influencer marketing, use AI as a whole? What tests should they consider for their campaigns?
Well, I think it always is predicated by who the organization is and how big they are and what their ability to execute is. Because at the end of the day, if we tell you a bunch of things to do because these are best practices, but you don't have the wherewithal to execute, then it just kind of goes into the never land of like, okay, well, that's all great, but we can't execute. So that's part of it. But let's assume that it's a content team that is a part of a brand that has some resources, some infrastructure. I would say the very first thing is depth of content is critical. So a lot of content. So that means somewhere between 8 to 16 blogs a month. As a recipe is where we've seen the best success. There can be a genuine impact with organic traffic, with SEO value, if you're creating content on a continual basis. The content has to be structured correctly. I think there's an implied value of having good SEO value associated with your content, but SEO is sort of like a tricky, slippery slope. We believe that the language in the content needs to be structured in a way that's going to drive the best possible engagement. That's what we do here. But by doing that and creating content that's consistent with how your audiences want to read content, you're essentially creating a piece of content that's going to drive higher engagement. By doing that, you're going to improve your rankings on Google because Google will reward you if people like your content. It's really that simple. So high quality, really good content that's structured in a way that's consistent with the profile you're trying to attract. Depth of that content, that has to be backed by a consistent flow of email sequencing. I'm giving you the recipe for the largest brands that we work with that all have really, really successful, we'll call them content strategies, but a heavy flow of emails, consistent. And the emails should be structured in a way that's consistent with the customer profiles. So taking the time to understand your email environment in a way that is not just like, hey, we're going to send out email blasts once a week, but understanding that there's customers, whether it's e-commerce or B2B customers, but there's customers that want to be spoken to in a certain way that are associated with your audience. So understanding who those customers are and how they want to be spoken to, and then delivering email correspondence that's consistent with that environment will not only get you a better open rate, but it's going to have a better experience as your customers, and there's going to be a driver of more loyalty. So email sequencing can be incredibly powerful if done correctly. The other part of it is when you're running, a marketing campaign. If you run an influencer campaign, try to think about it as just a marketing campaign. Almost say I'm going to take the word influencer out of it and think about it like, okay, I'm running a marketing campaign and we're doing an influencer group of influencers, whatever it is. We're activating 10 influencers, but let's think about it from a constructive perspective, backwards to forwards. Once they're done posting, how many pieces of content am I going to have? What type of content are we going to have? And what is the distribution strategy of that content above and beyond the organic distribution that you get with the influencers promotion? So that peppers into your paid advertising. That peppers into, can we create influencer blogs? Can we create influencer landing pages? Can we create influencer email sequences? By doing it and thinking about it from that perspective, it forces you to put some disciplines in the influencer campaign. It creates an environment where you're concerned about the rights to the content. It creates an environment where the influencers have a very specific mandate of the type of content that they should be created. And it also stimulates an environment where you're connected to your paid advertising. So you have a really clear idea of what types of content need to be created, because that's going to dictate your Facebook ads or Instagram ads or maybe Snapchat ads or whatever it is that you're doing. So that's a lot to say right there. And sometimes an SMB can say, well, I'm a one-person show on my content marketing team, and I don't really have a budget, and that's okay. You got to be scrappy, and you got to do what you got to do to get to a place. But there's things that you can do if you are really structured with your content strategy to get to an environment where you're producing lots of content. So the first thing I would say is just produce lots of content as much as you can. Figure out a way to get it out there. Put that into a calendared environment. And then as you get more resources, you can start to build into some of these more advanced things that we've been talking about. But content depth and quality of content are two hypercritical things associated with building a good content strategy.
Great recommendation. And then the complexity, but also the headline at the end there of get that depth, start creating your content. What about if it's not working? How do you optimize? This could also be for, a large organization that is just optimizing towards what's performing best in terms of their channels. And you just did a great overview of all the different distribution points. So whether it's working or not, how can you optimize? How can you manage it to a point of effectiveness?
Well, if it's not working, the very first thing you have to ask yourself before you even are optimizing anything is the product have issues? Do you have leaky buckets in your conversion pages? Is the product just not good? Do you have negative social proof that's detracting from sales? I found that, if you start with a really good product, that you can figure out the digital part of it over time. There's lots of different ways to do that. But let's just say that you don't have a leaky bucket. Your site speed is good. Let's just say that you don't have any negative social proof. So, you have all those right environments that are complementary to somebody saying yes, they're willing to roll with you. Then you would have to start looking at the different advertising networks that you're on and understand if those advertising networks, if things have changed. Things have changed recently with Facebook, for example. And a lot of these other advertising networks are starting to become very viable, scalable environments as an alternative to Facebook. So I think there's been a real shift. You have Facebook, but you also now have TikTok, you have Snapchat, you have Reddit, you have LinkedIn, you have Pinterest. As a digital advertiser, all of these channels are viable channels. And I've found that some of these channels work significantly better than others, but you have to take a second to really learn the channel and to understand the channel. And, the other thing as a digital marketer and as a digital advertiser, you kind of have to go, either you or somebody on your organization has to make it a priority to understand the environment intimately enough to where they can benefit from working with a Jason Fishman, for example, or a DNA, right? Because you can't just go in here and expect that you're going to hire an agency and they're going to solve your dreams. It's a collaborative environment. You're working together. There's a kind of like a pro quo, a back and forth that needs to happen between the brand and the agency, for example. So I think it's really important for smaller brands that are struggling with their conversion environments to take onus of it and understand that this is something that they have to personally get good at. They don't have to become experts, but they have to be good enough to where they can be a good supporting environment to when they go out and hire an agency. That way the agency is more positioned to be successful. So, it's a very complicated question. It's not like a one size fits all. And you can go down many different rabbit holes associated with it. But I can tell you this, if you have a good product and people like it and you're not selling snake oil, then there's an opportunity for you to figure out your digital marketing ecosystem. And you just have to stay at it and you have to figure it out. But if you have those things, as far as it being a good product, you can figure it out for sure.
And once you figure it out, how do you scale? You talked about at the beginning of this program with your introduction, you've had successful exits, including a fashion e-commerce subscription company that I still subscribe to, by the way. How do you scale? Once you see it working, you're working with an enterprise organization, how do you get them to the next levels? Any final thoughts to wrap with this in terms of how to scale?
Well, it's so we're talking about, depending on if you're like, enterprises are typically looking to cement their footprint versus SMBs and SMEs are looking for some sort of scale. So I think every SMB and every SME is going to tell you like, hey, if this works, there's an unlimited budget. I've heard that a million different times, and so have you. So the way you scale is by committing to your content environment. I've never seen a environment that scales that doesn't have content depth associated with it and high quality content. Mm-hmm. And there's a tipping point in the e-commerce world that is around the $7 to $10 million a year range that I've seen. I saw this with my last brand before we exited, and I've seen this also with some of our clients that are in the middle of scaling. Is you get to a point where you start to realize how important good content is and how important it is to have a lot of it all the time, because it just fills so many different holes. So I think that's really interesting. Another thing that I've also seen, which is almost odd, is at the enterprise. So the SMBs get this, the SMEs up to $100 million, SMEs $100 million to $1 billion. Those are typically really high quality environments for content production, right? In other words, they get the content depth. And then once you get to the next tier, which are the enterprise brands $1 billion a year or more, we've found that it's problematic getting the depth of content. These enterprises are struggling with it, which is counterintuitive to a degree. But if you think about it, maybe it makes sense, right? There's trouble getting approvals and what you should create. And, it's like a big ship in the ocean. So turning it is kind of a mission, right? So, we found these really interesting insights by having a diverse group of clients over the years. And each client type has very specific needs.
And, hearing from you who's done it firsthand, you've worked with a high volume of businesses in the SMB category, the small to mid-size enterprise in the SME category. It really, says a lot. It's really saying, based off the data, saying we are portals build our platform. This is what's working. Everything needs to be tailored specifically. Jeremy, I really appreciate the insights here. We've had the opportunity of working on campaigns together, also, high-level business chats, but to hear it in this level of detail, to say, if you want to scale, you need content depth. I haven't seen it happen otherwise. And don't just throw darts at a dartboard in the dark. You use the actual analytics to show you what's working best. Employ AI to do it. Have influencers that are going to really show up on the scoreboard involved. Again, it's no question mark to me how you guys are able to put together these large enterprise deals that go on for extended period of times because of the relationship, because of the performance involved. So thank you for opening up and sharing everything here today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Jason. I really do. Thank you.
Of course. And if anybody would like to get in contact with you, maybe they have some specific questions, maybe their campaign could use Rad AI, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email, Jeremy Barnett at radintel.ai, or you can contact us through our website, just on the contact page, so radintel.ai, and there's a contact us form that you can go on there and fill out. But if you want to reach out to me directly, feel free, and I'll either help you or our small sales team will help you, one of the two.
There you go. There you go. Well, Jeremy, again, really appreciate you breaking it all down for us today. I want to thank the audience for listening in. Again, do not shy away from reaching out to Jeremy. He's ready for questions. We actually need to keep him off that golf course and practicing, so let's bog him down with calls here. Again, Jeremy, thanks for joining, and we'll see everybody next time.
Take care, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Take care, guys.